So the last thing that we're going to talk about in this section is converting between text and numeric data. So as we've seen, let's get a new code chunk. Okay, so as we've seen, we can make variables. We can have a variable that's a number. We can have a variable that's a character string. We can have a variable that's a vector of numbers, or we can have oops, I should not have called that x. We'll call that x2. We can have a variable that is a vector of character, a vector of character variables. And the example that we saw, it was individual words were the elements of the vector. But we can even have phrases or sentences. So I like cats can be an element. Dogs bark, and the dog ate the bird. Could be, these can all be elements of a character vector. So what happens if we have something like this? Oh, and the way that are distinguishes between a word that is a text string and a word that is the name of a variable. Like, remember, we had a variable called cat, is quotation marks. So a text string without quotation marks, R is going to treat that as an object. It's going to look for that object in its environment. But a text string with quotation marks, R is going to treat as a literal string. So what happens if we have a variable like this? We have a variable 12 that takes the number 12. Okay, well, let's just run this whole chunk. We've put all of these variables into our working environment. And so we have the variable called 12. So we'll say class. Actually, I'm going to start a new chunk just so we don't have to keep running all of this over and over again. So, okay, so we have this variable called 12, and or tells us that it's a character variable, and we know that because we put it in quotation marks. But it looks a lot like a number. And so what if we wanted to try to treat it like a number? Let's say 12 plus 1. So R is going to give us a variable. I'm sorry, R is going to give us an error message because even though the variable 12 looks like a number, it really isn't. But because it does look like a number, we can coerce it into being a number. So the way that we do that is with the as numeric function. So it's as numeric 12, and we can add 1. And, oh, we've got to get rid of this because it's throwing the error. And now we do get a numeric answer, which is 13. So for to turn a character variable into a numeric variable, we had to explicitly coerce it. But the last example in this section of the book shows us that we don't actually have to do the same thing to coerce numeric variables into character variables. So for our last example, we have this okay, So this is our last example. We're taking the paste function. We're passing to it a vector of the numbers 4 through 12. That's the first argument. The second argument is the text that we want to add to each element of that vector. And the third argument is what we want to have separating the vector element and the text that we're adding to it. And so here, remember before when we used the paste function, we added juice, and we had said sep equals empty space, and we got rid of it because the empty space is the default. But here we want nothing between the number and the th, so we actually have to indicate that we want nothing with quotation marks with nothing in them. And okay, so what's going to happen here? What happened here is that R took this vector, which this was a numeric vector. We can see that it's a numeric vector if we go like this. So R took this numeric integer vector and turned it into a character vector by adding text to it, and it did that coercion implicitly. So we did not have to specifically ask R to do it the way that we did specifically have to ask R to do the conversion up here. Okay, so we've now made it through section 2.6 of the Arnold and Tilton book. That's going to be the end of this introduction to R, and we're now going to just talk a little bit more about this notebook format, because as you'll see, we have made this this notebook, but we haven't really done anything with it. Okay, so I'm going to save this notebook. I'm going to save it to our practice. I had part 2_5 before, so we'll call this part 2_6 and save. And before it saved it with a .r extension, now it's saving it with a .rmd extension because it's an R Markdown notebook. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is preview it. So preview, and okay, so we can see what's happened here. We've got our title, Humanities Data in R, section 2.6, the text chunk. So now, see, I put in this link here, and now it is an actual hypertext link. It's opening in my other window, but it is a link to the Markdown guide. And we can see that the text that I formatted italic and bold is now italic and bold. We also have all of our code chunks, and all of the output for the code chunks is right below them. So each line with output is going to have the output right below it. That's what's happening here. So as we can see here, the stringback didn't produce any output, but class stringback did, so the output goes right under that. Stringback has output, so it's right here. And so we can see everything that we've done. We can see all of our notes, and here this was how this was the text that I formatted as code, the paste function. Substring functions, we have all of our notes interspersed with our code and with the output. So this is just a really useful format for all kinds of things, really, for making notes, but also for creating things like we're going to do in this class, so graphs and maps and things like that, and including our code with our output. We can also hide things, show things as we want. Okay, so now if I go to where I saved it, I see that I have my RMD file. I also have this nb.html file. So let's say I'm going to go back to RStudio, close this all up. I'm not going to save my workspace image. Okay, um, so now I have these two files, this RMD and this nb.html. So I can open this up. I can open it in a web browser, and it's right here. So it looks quite nice in this format. I can also open either of these in RStudio and get back to my notebook and edit the notebook. So I can also output it into other formats, and those formats are right here. So I can knit it to HTML, which is going to end up looking very similar to the nb.html. I can knit it to PDF, which is going to give me something that looks more like LaTeX. So in this class, we are going to be making extensive use of our Markdown notebooks as a way to keep our code and the text that we write about our code in the same place. So, all right, thanks for watching these videos. I hope this was a useful introduction to R, and I hope it made the humanities data in R exercises a little bit more accessible.